Hi, my name is Steven Mackey. I'm a composer and was fortunate enough to be commissioned by the Naumburg Foundation to compose a piece for Amy and Valentine for sax and piano. And who are you, Amy?
I'm Amy Yan, I'm a pianist, and I'm so grateful to be here and having this chance to chat about this fantastic piece that you wrote for us. And this is...
Hello everyone, my name is Valentin Kovalev, and such a privilege, first of all, working with such incredible musicians, with Amy, with Steve, in order to bring this fantastic work to life, right? And of course, we're so grateful to the Naumburg Foundation. First of all, to even consider having the saxophone competition, even though Naumburg Foundation has a brilliant history of a century, right? A century of basically every year providing opportunities to young musicians to express themselves through the auditions, through the competition. And that was the first year that they held the competition for saxophone in 2022. It feels like it was just yesterday, but it's already 2 years past. And I was lucky enough to win the first prize shared with Andreas Mader, with other saxophonists. And I couldn't be happier having Steve Mackey to compose this very intricate piece, because it has so much story behind it we're going to talk about later on.
Yeah, I was thrilled to get an email that said Valentine had won the competition, and he'd wanted to know if I would be willing to compose a piece, and I was honored. It's especially an special honor because I'm a man of a certain age, and to have a younger generation of musician interested in having me write a piece was really meaningful to me. And right away I started to imagine, the saxophone as this kind of Pied Piper, instrument. It's got this allure. In fact, a lot of times in popular culture, the saxophone plays the kind of sexy role, and so this kind of allure of the saxophone is around and around in my head. And kind of thinking of a concept, I like to have a kind of governing metaphor for a piece. And very quickly it kind of came to, Pied Piper. And I have always been a fan of fairy tales in general. I'm a fan of storytelling and fairy tales where there's a kind of a ritual of things that happen. There's always a refrain that this happens, and then there's a new event, and then this happens again. And like with the Pied Piper, he comes and he plays and he draws all the mice out, but then he comes again, plays and he draws all the children out. It's actually, in the end, quite a dark story. And the piece, as a result, it's got lots of action, a lot of ups and downs, but there's a kind of a seething, repressed, dark intensity to it.
And in this piece, you're not trying to really tell the story in linear manner, right? Because you are really interestingly working with how the different characters from this piece develops throughout this entirety of the entire piece.
Yeah, well, for me, the story is already the story, in a linear way, and it tells itself. So what I tried to do was kind of musicalize elements of the story, celebration, sadness, manipulation, just these different characters that kind of fall out of the story, and I make musical motives out of them, and then the musical motives go together the way musical motives go together, right? I don't try to line them up in the order of the story, but rather try to have them have their own life. It's in a way, it's kind of like what I don't know much about this, but there's this thing called fan fiction, right? Where people take, say, Harry Potter. They take the characters out of Harry Potter and they write other stories with them. So in a way, that's sort of what I've done. I've taken the sort of elements, the expressive elements that kind of resonated with me as having kind of a musical manifestation. I took those and did some fan fiction and wrote another story that's purely music and no words.
Yeah. And for us as interpreters of the work, definitely helps having this narrative, clear, very clear narrative, to be able to really understand all of the characters, to figure out the way how to really interpret certain contrasting elements. And even the first time we met, I remember it was in a Kimmel Center in a cafe, like about a year and a half ago, right?
Yeah.
Again, it feels just like it was.
It was
few
yesterday.
days ago. And then we were talking about how we both enjoy when in music, we always have characters, we always have story behind, right? That's what I enjoyed so much about working on this piece. And of course, having so many contrasts, because especially for the more energetic moments, we have this like slap tones, we have this very short articulation, and how you work with, you have array of different elements that you are using that already is like so organic to this instrument. And I think that comes already from you having so much experience working with saxophone and with saxophonists, right? I admired your works for saxophone quartet, written for Prism Quartet, where one of my former professors, Timothy McAllister, is a soprano saxophone chair. So can you talk to us more about when did you start to really work with saxophone, and what do you think saxophone brings to the classical music?
Yeah, well, the saxophone is comfortable for me in a lot of ways because it is a relative newcomer to classical music, right? It's
one of the youngest instruments.
One of the youngest, yeah. Not quite as young as my instrument, the electric guitar.
Yeah.
but pretty young indeed, and I can relate to it in that way. I've often jokingly said that I specialize in writing music for underdog instruments. And while the saxophone is not an underdog in terms of its, acoustic power, it's an underdog in terms of its acceptance in the concert stage. So, as the same is true, even more so with the electric guitar. So the saxophone is part of my mother tongue, right? My mother tongue, grew up as a rock musician. I didn't know how to read music until I was 20. I hadn't heard classical music until I was 19. So, the saxophone, along with percussion and the electric guitar, are instruments that I work with now that are deep in my DNA, even deeper than the violin, or, those instruments that are quintessential to chamber music. Now, I'm old enough. I've got a lot of experience with all those instruments, but the saxophone taps into a deep part of the DNA, which is, why I think I had so much fun working with Prism, and I have a piece for them for just quartet and a quartet concerto with them, and working with them, they said one thing that stuck with me. I had an early sketch for a piece for them, and they went through it, and it was just a sketch. It was just getting the sounds, and they said, "Oh, you like it very much, but saxophonists like to wiggle their fingers fast." So I realized that there's a virtuoso tradition to the saxophone, as there is with the electric guitar, right? I grew up with Jimi Hendrix and players like that, but virtuoso music. It's Paganini has nothing on the traditions of the saxophone and the guitar too. So thinking of you and your you won this competition, it should be a celebration of that, and combined with the story. There's the story is action packed. Right from the beginning I said this is going to be a virtuoso piece, and everything I've learned about the saxophone. Like you said, the tongue stop, the percussive effects, and its agility, all that. And I remember I wrote some stuff, and I sent it to Valentine, and I said, is this too fast? Can you do this? And he never really responded to that. But I showed up at the first rehearsal, and first of all, you guys sounded great at the first rehearsal, and he just said, oh, that's why he didn't respond, because it was fine.
You didn't receive my response?
No.
Oh,
Did you say it was okay?
No, I actually recorded like a sample.
Well, you recorded a sample of some slap tongue.
Oh, okay.
But you never recorded a sample of that first, the first few pages that, there's first and then there's a double time version. You never.
I'll go back in time and record it.
Yeah, right.
And respond that it's possible.
Yeah, I now have learned that is quite possible. But not just, it's a rare treat as a composer to show up. I was, Nicholas Mann from the Naumburg Foundation and I were, we're talking about this, is that it's such a joy as a composer to come to a first rehearsal and hear it sound so great right off the bat, and it's like, oh, this is what it'll sound like when I'm dead. When I have absolutely no input, it sounded great. And Valentine, you were fantastic, but Amy, you were terrific too. And right from the start, Valentine talking about the character, right from the start, you were hungry. I got this. What would you say the character of this? And I would say something, and you would be, very, accepting, take everything on board, and have it affect the way you played. And it was really great to play with a pianist like that. Yeah.
I mean, it's such an explosively and artistically enriching experience for me to have been part of this process, and having admired each of you individually for such a long time. And when Valentin said, would you like to be a part of this recital? And there's a new commission by Steven Mackey. It's like, yes, I've loved his music. And I would be so privileged to get up and close to it. And looking at the score, and also, as you say, its partnership with your fierce investment in storytelling through music, and I know you're also working on something with the Grimm fairy tales right now. Yeah, and having this parallel journey of the fairy tale that we can relate to, and all the menacing and the doom that comes with music being a way to draw out elements or to tell a story, and also to bring a story to its, in this case, a fatal end. And to work with Valentine, and I honestly have never played with saxophone before, and this has completely, this collaboration with you, Valentine, has completely blown my mind. And I remember after our first rehearsal, just telling everybody about, I've just met the most colorful artist.
No, I was talking the same about you, actually. It was mutual, like we were both finding so much inspiration. I was finding so much inspiration from all of our rehearsals. Yeah. We forgot to mention that we already premiered this work in the Carnegie Hall, in Weill Recital Hall, back in March. And that was just one of the most memorable moments. Highlights definitely in my life. So many people listened to the work premiere, and it was lots of responsibility on our shoulders. And now,
I mean, one thing I bet you enjoy, Amy, is like when you play with a violin, you always got to, you could just play out,
exactly.
And that's one thing I appreciated in the first rehearsal. I knew you guys were gonna nail it when we got to measure 18, where it says fierce.
Yeah.
And just you were just, whew. That's fierce. She looks like such a nice woman. It was really.
It's thank you for giving us that opportunity, actually, to really dig in, because I mean, often I feel like the greatest kinds of artists are playing, of course, in collaboration with our instruments, but telling a story that's way beyond the sonic capacity of the instrument, and bringing sounds of real life back into what the instrument can do.
But that's actually that reminds me of this kind of again, the ways in which it tells the story and the ways in which it doesn't tell the story. For example, it opens, there's nothing in the story about bells, but I just imagine in any village there's got to be bells, right? So, the piece starts with this church bells or the village bells, and it was one of the, again, early on where I said, oh yeah, they really want to take ownership of these characters, which was just such a pleasure to work with. You really wanted to get those bells chiming.
Yeah, and if you really think of like a bell ringer, I don't know what they're called, in a high tower somewhere, and the idea, and also the visual element of imagining that within a town village too, and then this Pied Piper marching along,
marching through.
Yeah.
With kind of challenges, I think, of the piece, which you guys pull off so wonderfully, is the bells are in their own time. Yeah. The Pied Piper isn't going to play necessarily synced up with the bells, so the polyrhythms that result, inspired by some kind of realism, but it's tricky to play. And you guys, take your individual. Yes, I'm the bells. You're the Pied Piper, and you are independent. Yet, we know that there's a secret connection, in the polyrhythm.
Yeah, and this is actually something very significant to the piece. Is that. It always comes with a collaboration, because the piece really depends on different lines, and there are so many different things happening at the same time. This polyrhythm, and I found that it was really essential for us to really work together on the piece. All three of us actually, because when I was just practicing by myself, it wasn't the same feeling, because I was missing listen really to those chimes, to those different motifs and very surprising moments in the bass. And
your experience of the rhythm is different with her.
Yeah, and what's really fun about it is just learning your language from scratch, and then coming to know it months later, and having an ability to intuit better, and it becoming more assimilated in the language, and the rhythms become more innate, and that's really, really fun to join together in this journey.
And for me as a saxophonist, one of the youngest instruments, not as young as the electric guitar, but it's always so enriching to our repertoire to have more and more such amazing composers like Steve to write and really bring more attention to my instrument. So
it's a great instrument.
And I'm 100% confident that this piece will, it will draw lots of attention from other saxophonists, and we'll hear more and more in concert halls.
Yeah, if they're up for it. I mean, you do set the bar very high, I must say. But
but I think in this piece, everyone can really draw so much their own personality through. They can tell their own story. That's something that I think will be very interesting to see other people to interpret this piece, because it's really artistic choice. It comes to because regardless of this piece seems to be that it's always have the same rhythm, which is one of the most important fundamental parts of having the same kind of beat throughout the entire piece, and all of the tempos, they are correlated, right?
They're all mathematically.
They're all mathematically calculated, precise, but still on top of all of this great structure, there is lots of room to explore, and that's what we're enjoying so much working with Amy, and really spending hours just thinking about the characters,
colors,
trying to align the characters in the respond to the sound.
You set the bar really high for the performing of this piece. What advice do you have for other performers who in the future might take on this challenge?
Great question. I think it's very important really explore your inner voice and how you, despite listening to our interpretation, how does this music make you feel, and how do you want to depart on this journey and explore different colors, different combinations, and perhaps bring up different characters, different energies, trying to play out with dynamics, something that we were playing, and bringing out different notes perhaps from the harmonies, just trying to really bring attention towards something really, really concrete in this music, and just have fun. right? It's, music is about having fun, despite that it's Ratcatcher, right? Grim story, but we were having so much fun working on this music, and I'm again thankful to all of you involved in this process, and it's gonna be just great memories for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in.